What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a spoiler-filled discussion of the film that is The Long Walk. It's based off a Stephen King novel and is directed by Francis Lawrence and written by J.T. Molnar. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's a spoiler discussion, so be aware I'm going to talk about spoilers. I'm also going to kind of compare the book and the movie, kind of see the differences in interest and stuff like that, about what's the same and what's different. So be aware that if you haven't read the book, I'd highly recommend it because it's a very interesting, a little more demented than the movie, to be fairly honest. Just a recap of The Long Walk is about a group of young boys. In the book, it's 100 boys, but in the movie, it's 50 boys who basically sign up in a lottery in a dystopian apocalyptic world where they compete in a kind of tournament, as you will, where they can't stop walking and they have to stay above 3 to 4 miles an hour or they will get their ticket punched. And, spoiler alert, they will die in the process. And the catch is only one person can be the winner. It is one person alone. So therefore, a lot of people are going to die in this movie. And it's not really that surprising because, once again, one person has to has to win. Most of the people are going to die. What makes this movie so interesting, what makes it so unique, is that you become close to these boys. I mean, the book especially, because it goes into so much detail of what Stephen King is known for. But, learning about Ray and learning about McFreeze and learning about Stebbins and learning about Barkovich and learning about Olsen and, Baker and stuff like that, you really get a good sense of who these characters are. And yes, the movie has to kind of not tone it down, but it kind of has to boil it down into a movie form. If you think about similar to the Catching Fire, the Hunger Games series, it's all taught in the first person point of view. And a lot of this movie is the same way, where it's from the mindset of the boys themselves, especially Ray's character. And so this movie is, once again, like the book, it's getting into the minds of who these kids are. You start developing relationships with these kids. Once again, McFreeze and Ray basically become good friends in a lot of respects. They have their thing called the Musketeers. And in the process of everything, as we know, boys in this series die. Barkovich is the main kind of crazy individual who causes death and becomes kind of like unfurled because of the situation. But it becomes a thing where you just watch these boys have to go through so much torment and so much despondency, and the fact that nobody can help them and they have to constantly keep walking and going through that mindset, how the deterioration and how it uses the idea of control, and how it uses the idea of what it's like to just live in a world that is so unspooled in a lot of respects. It's similar to what, if you, depending on how you feel, what we're going through now. And it's really devastating to watch. I mean, it left me in awe of just how violent it is, how violent Olsen's death is, and how Barkovich stabs himself in the neck, and how Parker dies, and then Baker, who has a hemorrhage and stuff like that. And then once again, you learn about these Ewing character and Rank and all these people who don't last very long, but they're so sadly in your face when it comes to what they are and who they are. And it's a really devastating movie to watch. Once again, they can't stop for anything. They can't stop for taking a poop. They can't stop for keep walking, but they can touch their family, but they can't touch anyone. In the book, it goes into much more detail about how just how people offer them stuff, and how people and animals are killed if they interfere. And because of what the world is, and what, of course, Mark Hamill's character, the Major, has represented, which once again is very much prevalent in the book. It really is that nature of what it's like for individuals to be put in that world where there is control against them. There is the push forward of who they are. And it's a really devastating experience. It's really difficult to watch. And so therefore, I thought it was a really fascinating movie, one of the best of the year, because it's just so good. And it's so condensed properly by J.T. Molnar, and it's so well shot by Francis Lawrence, who was known for doing stuff like this type of movie with I Am Legend and the Hunger Games, where it is about the desolation and the apocalyptic scenarios of what people will do when faced with the idea of living through a situation and being able to gain populace and what it's like for people who are desperate. That's kind of the themes that Stephen King goes for in these types of stories. But what's really interesting about the movie, and what I once again, I finally read the book, so I kind of have now a justification of what's going on, is how much of these characters' motivations, how much of what they represent are in this movie, but what also is combined. Once again, when you watch a book, or when you read a book and then you watch the movie, you can definitely tell the differences between like what the writer JT Molnar in this instance has created. There are things that happen in the book, especially the ending, which is completely different, that don't happen in the movie. Characters and how they interact with the world itself in the book, with the simple fact that like there's much more interaction, there's much more populace when it comes to the crowds that are watching him or rooting him on. Once again, you see like how difficult it is for him not to take watermelon and not to take stuff from people. Once again, you see just a lot more stuff. You go into cities and you just see how this world, this Running Man experience, this long walk has caused like almost kind of a societal kind of comeuppance. In the book, there's a lot of characters in the book with Ray and Ray Garrity and McFreeze who don't come off as friendly to one another. They're friends in the sense that like they keep each other motivated. But in the movie, what David Jonsson and Cooper Hoffman do really well, and what JT Molnar's script does really well, is it allows these two characters to have dimension, and it allows these characters to really have a sense of purpose and really have a sense of brotherly love and brotherhood. And really interesting thing to see where in the movie, Cooper Hoffman's Ray character is much on a vendetta quest to take down the Major because of what happens to his father. But in the book, that doesn't happen. His father is taken away and probably killed, but it doesn't really, you never see the Major with Ray's character, which you see in the movie. Ray's character is just basically there to, protect his family, help his family out. And there is just a lot more interesting kind of things and thoughts put into the movie version that is not in the book version. Once again, McFreeze, who actually is the character that lives in the end of the movie, actually is the second character to die, is the third to last character to die in the book, because Stebbins, who actually has some of the, in this movie version, has some of the stuff that characters like Olsen and Barkovich and Harkness end up developing in the book, where he gets sick. Stebbins in this movie gets sick. He gets the flu. The character of Baker actually is pretty close to the character you see in the book. But McFreeze, of course, lives and kills the Major in the movie, but that doesn't happen in the book. Actually, McFreeze dies by sitting down, and Cooper Hoffman's Ray character in the book, Raymond Garrity, actually just keeps walking on, and the Major just lives. So that's a really interesting thing that I'm actually curious of why JT Molnar went that direction. The thing that Stephen King has issues with, or his storytelling, is his endings are never really fully realized or fully interesting. So here it feels more complete. It feels more appreciative and authentic. It doesn't feel like, I mean, I guess you could call the book with the ending of Ray with the fact he loses everyone and he just can't, his mind breaks, I guess. And you see that with McFreeze in this one. I guess it's kind of the same thing, but it's told in a different angle, and actually kind of tells the story in a very much more interesting dimension. The other thing is, because the book was written in 1979, a lot of stuff in the movie is brought up to date, so the characters are more they're more like in like the different like nationalities. Like Hank is an Asian guy, Baker of course is a black guy, and McFreeze is a black guy. I'm pretty sure none of them were black in the book except for a couple characters. But like I said, Stebbins is much more, I think he's much more dimensional in the book than he is in the movie. But his character arc, where we find out that he is the illegitimate child of the Major, it's carried through in the book. But the simple fact that like Stebbins is the third person to die in the movie, but he's the second character to die in the book, and the fact that, watching Olsen in the book just kind of fall apart, go crazy, and it kind of works out in the movie. There's a lot of stuff that carries over, and I think JT Molnar does a really nice job of carrying all that into an interesting sphere of much more kind of, once again, there's much more dimension. A lot of these characters don't really interact very well with one another. Watching like how they just kind of are on their own and stuff like that. And like I said, a lot of stuff is the same, the pacts that they make and how they kind of fall apart from the pacts at the end, the yelling and screaming. I like the fact that There's much more interesting ideas with the weather. There's much more interesting ideas with the world that is in the book that doesn't get represented in the movie. And once again, to make a movie an hour and 50 minutes, you have to cut out a lot from a 400 to 500 page book or whatever, or it was like 388, but whatever it was. So there's a lot of stuff that, like the Hunger Games, there's a lot of stuff that you miss out unless you read the book that it doesn't represent. But I think what Francis Lawrence, J.T. Molnar, and their producers, what they understand is the core concept of why this story is so disturbing, why the story is so monumental, why it so works on a kind of visceral level, is because you get to see these characters and you only see these characters and you focus only on these characters and what they represent and what they do. And it's very palpable and very kind of easygoing. It's not easygoing because it's very visceral in the violence, and the violence is very palpable and visceral in the book. But it works on the simple fact that it really represents a good telling of this story that kind of condenses a lot of character arcs and motivations on the ideas of what they do, adds in the flourishes to make it a much more movie-going experience, and the authenticity is there. So therefore, I think with the cast and crew, which once again, I point out that David Johnson's McFreeze character is the standout of the movie, and David Jonsson with this and Alien Romulus does a really nice job of representing an actor who's done a really nice job. Cooper Hoffman is kind of showing his way. And like I said, you have a lot of characters like Ben Wang and of course Charlie Plummer and Nyuot and stuff like that. They really do a nice job, but Dave Jonsson is the standout and really the kind of pushing forward to what this movie really represents, which is, it's really nice to see those two characters work well together like they do in the book. It's nice to see that David Johnson's McFreeze's version and his character comes off a little less a-hole-ish in the movie than he does in the book. And I think the movie and where it heads and what it does is a complete, authentically faithful adaptation, but it has the flourishes. And like I said earlier, when you watch the end of the movie and you go, oh my God, Ray's spent all this time going, I'm going to bring down the major. I'm going to kill him for what he did to my father. And then he just stops and dies. And then, Johnson's character, McFreeze, goes off and kills the major with his one wish. There's a lot of interesting stuff because in the book, the wish is the only thing they get. They don't get money as well unless they ask for it. But the one other thing I do appreciate is the simple fact that it's so ambiguous in the ending of the book. What is that character that Raymond Garrett sees? What is he walking towards? Could be his father. It could be death. I think it is interesting, the simple fact that like McFreeze just keeps walking, and the simple fact that it's damaged their minds so much, it's damaged their who they are so much that they'll just keep walking. And it's really fascinating, really interesting thing to see, watching Collie Parker do his thing and watching, the major. I think Mark Hamill does best with what he can do in this movie, which is not a lot, but the major's not a lot in the book and stuff like that. And it really is good that they toned it down from 100 boys to 50 boys because it makes it more more easy to watch, digestible in a lot of respects. And then on top of everything, the boys that die in the book are pretty similar to the boys that die in the movie, but do it in different ways, like how they are killed, like how they die and stuff like that. It's pretty similar, so there's not a huge amount of changes there. And the characters that die first are pretty much the ones that die first in the movie and stuff like that. So it really works on a movie-going level. If you want a much more thorough, much more interesting take on the story, I'd read the book. Not very long. It's like 300 to 400 pages or whatever. And I think, this movie is just great. It really is. It's fantastic. I love the chemistry between the characters and the boys in the story. They're much more fleshed and realized, and the world and how scary it is, and the shots that Francis Lawrence and his cinematographer Joe Willems do are beautiful to watch, and it really has a great aesthetic. So that's my overall spoiler discussion for The Long Walk, kind of comparing it to the book, to the movie. And once again, the movie's great. The movie's fine. If you don't read the book, you're going to get the same kind of story arc outside the ending. Just be aware the ending is completely different and much more ambiguous and much more Stephen King-ish in the book than it is in the movie. So there's that. It's similar to like The Mist and stuff like that, where it's so ambiguous you're not really sure what it's going to do. So there you go. Anyways, with that said, that is going to be my spoiler discussion for The Long Walk. I hope you enjoy the movie. Be aware, it's very disturbing. It's very, it's unsettling. It's violent. People get shot in the head. Blood goes everywhere. It's stupid crazy how violent it is. But it's a great movie. It's one of my favorites of the year. So there you go. Anyways, with that said, thank you so much for watching. In the comments below, what did you think of this movie? If you've seen it, tell me what you think overall. If you read the book, how you feel like the comparisons. But otherwise, if you like what you see on the channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like the video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.